Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Magic Movements, 5 transformational patterns every movement professional should be using, but most aren't. These 5 movements are simple on the surface, but they reveal profound truths below the surface. They highlight how the body really moves through chain reaction biomechanics and why traditional education never fully prepared us to treat and train the whole person. I'm Doug Gray, and I'm honored to be teamed up with my dad and mentor. Many know him as the father of function, Dr. Gary Gray. And today is extraordinary for another reason. Today we are announcing and offering 2 incredible resources for free to all movement professionals. Number 1, free access to our full functional techniques course. Normally $99, CEUs are included. This course is designed to give you practical, immediately applicable techniques built on applied functional science, AFS. It takes the foundational movements we're teaching today and expands them into dozens of strategies, tweaks, and progressions you can use tomorrow or even today with any patient or client. Functional Techniques bridges the gap between understanding AFS principles and applying them with confidence. And for the first time ever, you'll have full access to the entire course at no cost. And number 2, a new Gray Institute free trial membership, giving you access to a curated selection of videos from our membership platform. Over 200 videos in this trial membership. It's intentionally just a taste, not the full platform, so you can experience the power and depth of AFS in a meaningful, realistic way. Today, I will guide the conversation, demonstrate each movement, and then cue Gary up to unpack the science, the biomechanics. And then we'll show you how to activate your free access to both functional techniques and the trial membership at the end. Let's jump right in. To understand today's magic movements, we must first acknowledge the real problem. Most professionals were taught exercises, not movement, muscles, not mechanics, positions, not purpose, protocols, not processes, symptoms, not causes. Traditional training is helpful, but it only scratches the surface. And because it scratches the surface, clients re-injure, athletes plateau, strength doesn't transfer, pain cycles return, movement compensations multiply, and results stagnate despite our best efforts. We are often treating symptoms instead of the source because traditional education simply didn't teach us the deeper truths. One of the processes in applied functional science is the PST process, and this provides us a complete map. It teaches us the principles, why movement works, the strategies, how we influence movement, and the techniques, what we actually do. And the magic happens in the transformational zones, in the chain reaction biomechanics, the moments when mass, momentum, and direction transition. Today's 5 magic movements reveal these zones clearly, and your free access to functional techniques in the trial membership will help you expand this understanding well beyond today. We'll start where every authentic chain reaction begins, the foot and the ankle. Most foot and ankle issues are treated in a single plane, but the foot never functions in a single plane. That's why plantar fasciitis returns, why ankle sprains recur, why knee and back pain persist, because the chain is forced to compensate when the foundation cannot load and unload in 3D. Let's allow the PST process to guide us in how to prepare and to enhance the foot and ankle. A principle, motion must occur in all 3 planes. Strategy, use drivers such as the same side knee, pelvis, and opposite side foot to create authentic loading. Technique, the 3D foot and ankle stretch. I'm gonna go ahead and demo this for you. Looks a lot like the traditional calf stretch, which again, is a great start, but it really usually just covers one plane of motion. So we take that knowledge and we go ahead and say, if I'm gonna go ahead and mobilize and stabilize this left foot and ankle, I'm gonna get into that position with my hands forward at shoulder, pushing against this wall. And traditionally I would just kind of lean into this, which is a pretty good stretch, but only in the sagittal plane. We know that the foot, like all of our body parts, move in 3 planes of motion. So we take a localized driver, which is the same side knee, and say, knee, let's go ahead and perform a matrix where you drive it forward and back, you drive it side to side, and then you rotate it in and rotate it out. And as you can see, my foot is starting to move in all 3 planes of motion. So when we go for a walk, our foot better go ahead and be able to adapt to that step and then propel us off that step, which means it better be loading and exploding in all 3 planes. But the foot feeds the rest of the body. So we can build upon this matrix and say, let's just not use the same side knee as the driver, but let's move a little bit further away from that foot and ankle to incorporate more of the body. And in the same position, now I take a really good driver, my pelvis, and I move it forward and back, side to side, and rotate. And you start to see, well, the foot and ankle is doing the exact same thing that you did with the knee as the driver, but because now the driver is further away from that localized area, the rest of the body is starting to understand how to accept that motion and facilitate that motion elsewhere. We can take it even one step further, maybe the pun was intended, but now we go with this opposite side foot, and this opposite side foot's going to do the exact same thing that the drivers have done, and we go forward and back. We go side to side, and we go ahead and rotate one way, rotate the other way, and now you're starting to see the same thing happen at the foot and ankle. Now the hip's more involved, but because that opposite side foot's driving, the thoracic spine's more involved, and we just really attack the big 3 rocks of the body by functionalizing a traditional calf stretch to say that this is what the foot and ankle should do. So what really I just showed you is only the start. Inside calves, certification in applied functional science, we teach you how to individualize these strategies to each client's transformational zones. In our foot and ankle specialization, we dive even deeper into restoring motion, stability, and efficiency. Your functional techniques course includes several foot and ankle applications you can begin using right away. And your free trial membership gives you a curated selection of related videos so that you can start exploring the broader ecosystem, even though it's not the full membership just yet. Now what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to ask Gary to do me a favor and give us the biomechanical elevator pitch to the foot and ankle.
I appreciate that, Dougie. A lot of times when we share about functional movement patterns, and our patients do them, or our clients do them, or we ourselves do them, right after we do them, we start to move better, and we say, is that magic? And we kind of get a kind of giggle look on our face, and we go, kind of, but it's really biomechanics. And so as we think about these magic movements, we really want to think biomechanically what's going on to make it feel like magic, because it feels like magic, like all of a sudden something transformed in my body, and I'm able to do something that I couldn't do before. Now, the foot and ankle is a great example. The foot and ankle, what it does, as Doug said, is it moves in 3 planes of motion. But it gets loaded in 3 planes of motion because of gravity. And we have the rest of our body that tries to get it out of that collapsing, that loading mechanism, what people sometimes will call pronation or eversion, in order then to invert and propel. Now, with most functional activities, the goal is to have a foot that's kind of squishy when it initially hits the ground, but have a foot that can propel us to where we want to go, like in walking and running and just about everything we do. However, to get to that propulsion, the magic is where the foot now can what we call invert or go opposite of pronation, what we could call supination, and what we call lock up the foot. Now, you'll learn a lot of that in the membership. You'll hear that over and over again. How in the world does the foot go from squishy to locked up? And it all has to do with what Doug just showed us, getting the foot mobilized not only when it's going through eversion, as you saw that left foot go through eversion, but also going through inversion while it's going through dorsiflexion. That's what our foot really doesn't want to do, because that's what we would call anti-gravity. Every step we take, every move we make, it goes, man, I'd rather go somewhere easy. But the body goes, no, I need to take you somewhere where we can restore the magic in the body. And a lot of times we'll share with people in gait and walking. If I was to ask you what are the function of the abdominals, kind of we scratch our head, and the answer is it helps contribute to the deceleration of that pronation, that collapsing, and it helps with the acceleration. It's a very powerful muscle group to actually accelerate and to get the foot locked up so we have not a squishy foot that we push off of, and all of a sudden when we push off, our eyes get big, go, that to me seems like magic. In my own experience, I realized that when that plantar fasciitis is not getting better, when that ankle sprain, they just don't have that explosion that they had prior to the ankle sprain, when that patellofemoral problem is just not going away, when that low back just kind of seems to be lingering, I scratch my head and go, man, I'm missing something here. And usually I'm missing that magic movement of making sure that their foot can actually load in all three planes of motion, but more importantly, explode and show dorsiflexion that it needs to show while the foot's locked up. So it's not mushy and trying to push off that. That's, well, mushy foot, that's gonna cause more plantar fasciitis. That's gonna give me an ankle that's not gonna be strong. That's not gonna let my femur externally rotate to help with the patellofemoral problem. That's gonna actually force my pelvis to stay in a place where the facets are just gonna get beat up. And I go, man, I need that magic movement of that foot and ankle. And so you'll be able to be exposed to that, but as Doug said, even more on how to take advantage of that mobility to create the stability as you benefit from the Gray Institute membership.
Now, let's explore a movement everyone performs daily, but almost no one trains authentically: squatting. We were taught to squat as one primary movement: feet side by side, shoulder width apart, toes pointing relatively forward. But people squat in hundreds of different ways. So traditional training leaves people with knee pain, especially back pain, whether immediate or even down the road, and certainly poor transfer into sport and life. Again, let's allow the PST process to guide us in how we enhance squatting. Principle: movement is dictated by gravity, ground reaction, and task. Strategy: use variable 3D foot positions to explore transformational zones. Technique: the 3D squat matrix. As I demo this 3D squat matrix, we're going to start with what is already understood. And that's when our feet are side by side, relatively shoulder width apart, and toes are pointing relatively forward. And this is a really good, comfortable, athletic position in which we squat. But we know that life doesn't allow us to squat the same way over and over and over and over. So what we need to do is we need to create a matrix within the squat. And how we do that is we break it up into all three planes. So in the sagittal plane, I'm going to put my right foot in front of my left, and I can perform a squat in this position. And then I do the mirrored image where the left foot is in front of the right in the sagittal plane, and I can do a couple squats. And immediately that puts a different stress throughout my body just by changing the feet in the sagittal plane. You already guessed, we're probably going to change it in the frontal plane. So one thing we can do is go a little bit greater than shoulder width, or what we would simply call wide, and do a couple squats that way. And if we can go wide, we can go narrow, which is less than shoulder width apart, and we can do squats in that way. Again, putting a different stress on our body. And then the transverse plane, what we simply do is we go ahead and toe in or internally rotate and do a couple squats. And then we go ahead and toe out or externally rotate and do a couple squats. So we really just did a normal squat, a right squat, a left squat, a wide squat, a narrow squat, internally rotated squat, externally rotated squat for our squat matrix. 7 different patterns that begin to emulate and look like that which what we're training or squatting for. Now you're already thinking, well, you can mix and match in a variety of ways, and that is the goal. But we start by the foundation of how we can squat in all three planes. This matrix essentially reconditions the lower chain, but it's still just the foundation. Inside calves, we teach you how to create individualized squat progressions based on each client's needs. In our core conversion workout from our 3D Matrix Performance Series, this is actually part of the full membership and included in the trial membership. These squats become integrated 3D strength patterns built from AFS. Your free functional techniques course includes foundational squat applications. And your trial membership gives you select videos that show you how these ideas expand. Again, it's a curated sample, not the full access. Gary is now going to come back with us and give us an elevator pitch to squatting.
I recently had the privilege of being on a podcast called The Ultimate Assist with Ken Rutgers and John Stockton. Now, if you're a basketball wacko like me and you hear the name John Stockton, your eyes get really big and you get a big smile on your face. And for me, it was a privilege to just be able to be interviewed by those two gentlemen in reference to free to play. John still holds the NBA record for steals and assists. Think about that. He steals the ball and in order to give it to one of his teammates. Kind of a pretty good thing to be known about. But during that podcast, at the end, they said that we have a thing called rapid fire. We talk about training and conditioning and prevention and all kinds of good stuff and how to better take care of kids. And one of the questions he asked is if you happen to be an 18-year-old athlete and you just want to develop and you want to be the best you can possibly be, what would your advice be? And my first thing that came to my mind was, it's not all about you. And I remember John just kind of looked and said, man, that's an amazing answer. A better question I thought he asked was, what's the most underrated exercise? And I immediately said squat. But here's what we have to understand. A squat isn't a squat, isn't a squat. What do I mean by that? When we walk, we squat. In other words, when I get into the transformational zone of walking, a big part of that is my body squatting and loading and exploding so I can take my next step. Obviously, when I jump, first thing I do is I squat and I go up and I want to go get something. I want to hit a ball, I want to rebound a ball. When I even load, explode to hit a tennis ball, it's a squat that allows me to have the power to do that. Even in the golf swing, when we get here and we get in the transformational zone, it's a squat and a propulsion of my body and my pelvis in order to get me to where I want to go. But as you can see, those are all different kinds of squats. And Doug did a great job sharing with us what we call the 7 basic squats. Kind of the XXX, sagittal plane tweak, frontal plane tweak, and transverse plane tweak. And what's beautiful about that is that's a great foundation of starting, but then say, okay, then I can mix those up. I can go maybe the right foot out a little forward, a little wide, externally rotate, and all of a sudden I look like I'm getting ready to play defense in basketball. And so my body says, I love this squat matrix. And what's nice about it is when I get done with it, I feel like I'm more magic. I feel like I can move better. And of course, that's the goal of any movement, is that we can ultimately move better. But having the basis covered for our squats is really the magic to this. In other words, if I want to squat better in gait, I'll probably put myself in the transformational zone of gait and then do some squats there. So my body says, okay, I need to have that mobility, but I need to have the stability to take advantage of the gravity, creating this reaction between the ground reaction force and the reaction of mass and momentum to allow my body to explode, i.e. load the squat and explode the squat so I can move better. Squatting is the foundation for everything, but many times I forget that it should be the core of pretty much everything I do. And again, it's okay to go maximal squat, to do what we call that if the body's ready for it, but there's 1,000 other better squats for most people to get their body prepared for squatting for what they want to do, which you'll find out in the membership. And obviously just an introduction in functional techniques is we need to have a purpose for what we do. So we're just not going to squat for squatting's sake. Squat isn't a squat isn't a squat. My question would be for you, if you're my client, you're my patient, you're my athlete, you're the person I'm taking care of, what squatting progression can I take you through to make it in your body feel like magic?
This next movement explains why strong athletes still get injured. It can be summed up as what 3D maps, three-dimensional movement analysis and performance systems, same side rotational chain reaction movement covers. Traditional strength training doesn't really prepare athletes for triplane deceleration. That's why we see ACL tears, sports hernias, growing strains, and trunk overload, even in strong, what we would call fit athletes. Back to the principles, strategies, and techniques. Principle, joints prefer integration over isolation. Strategy, use rotational drivers to reveal transformational zones. Technique, same side rotational 3D maps movement. As I demonstrate this movement, this is again from 3D maps. Now I'm only going to show you one of the 6 powerful chain reaction movements, but 3D maps essentially is the gold standard of assessment in the industry. Why? Because no other assessment deals with the 3-dimensionality of the body, the integration of the body, and the fact that the body has to have mobility and stability. So how we get to that point is I'm going to use the same side rotational chain reaction as the example. And we would simply start with a same side rotational lunge, and we would do this both ways, right foot going right rotational, left foot going left rotational, and I'm already starting to drive my hands in that same direction. We may just start with the lunges and then just go ahead and swing the arms in the same direction before we then piece it together. But as we do this same side rotational chain reaction, our hands are simply following the foot and where we're lunging. The more important aspect is what it's doing to the body. And if you just simply looked at the powerful aspect of the hip, we're facilitating that external rotation as the primary motion of that hip in the same side rotational chain reaction. But what you also notice is that I'm going away and I'm going through a little bit of extension and abduction. And what we're really doing is exposing what Gray Institute has been calling forever the front butt. Yeah, we got the back butt, which is very strong. And the front butt might not have as much muscle mass there, but it better be strong as well. And it's not only strong in how it moves, but how it controls that motion. And so we can really understand somebody's flexibility, their range of motion by this same side rotational chain reaction. But if we wanted to then say, how do we understand the stability or the body's ability to control, decelerate, and bring us back home? Instead of now doing a lunge, we take the lunge and we do a balanced foot reach, right rotational with the right foot, left rotational with the left foot, and we can toe touch at ground, or we can even hover it at ankle height, and then we tack on what the hands are doing, and now we're really exposing that front butt to depend on the lower part of the body and the upper part of the body as an integrated chain reaction to say, not only do I have this motion, but more importantly, I can control it. That's just one of the 6 movements. So this movement, as I said, is only one of the 6 global motions or movements inside 3D maps. And our certification helps you see and improve that human movement needs to be 3D and enhanced in real time. Your free functional techniques course includes applications rooted in these same principles. And the trial membership gives you a curated sample of 3D maps related videos, not the full library, but enough to understand the transformative potential. Gary, as you can guess, again, is going to come in and provide an elevator pitch to the same side rotational chain reaction movement to what we like to call the front butt.
As with any great magic trick, you get to see the magic trick, but you don't get to see the magic behind it. And a lot of understanding applied functional science and the magic of these movements is understanding, well, the magic behind it, or the biomechanics behind it, or the purpose behind it, or the truth behind it. Wow, talk about a magic move that we don't see a lot of people doing in training and conditioning. We don't see a lot of people doing in rehab. And we scratch our head and say, boy, if there's one thing that I'd want to do is I'd want to make my, as Doug called it, and we've called it for years, my front butt more effective. The interesting thing about our front butt is gravity just tries to make it short. Gravity does it in the sagittal plane, gravity does it in the frontal plane, and gravity even does it in the transverse plane, so it doesn't get the mobility that we need. And all of a sudden we go, boy, if I could give that front butt a little more mobility by maybe, let's see, I'm going to use a foot driver and opening up here an external rotation, and as Doug properly said, biomechanically, a little bit of extension and a little bit of abduction. And at the same time, I can add a top-down driver to this hip, and I can get that external rotation, and I can get a little more extension and abduction. Wow, I can now create some mobility here so this part of my body can magically capture strength. Unless we have the mobility to load the muscles and turn on the proprioceptors and get the muscles engaged, we're not going to get the strength. So we just can't kind of lay down and lift our leg up and hope that that front butt's going to get strong. It has to come through the foot, it's got to come through the core, and it's got to talk to the hip. Now when you look at this move, you can see that, well, if I do this move, and I, instead of lunging into this leg, if I kind of toe touch, you can see that my knee kind of goes in. You can see that my hip kind of goes an external rotation. And if you were, let's say you're the ACL, you'd say, whoa, this is a magic move, because if you can learn how to do this and then come back home, you're going to protect me. However, if you have what I call gunky, in other words, limited front butt, and you go here and you're reaching for a ball and you haven't been trained to load that and then strengthen it and explode it, as you'll learn as you go through your journey of applied functional science, then you're at risk for an ACL tear. I also believe it's what sets us up for a labral tear. I believe that hip labral tear is something to do with extension, abduction, external rotation. And when I see a lot of athletes who've had it, one of the questions I'll ask them is, part of your training, have you done this magic move, this move here? And they look at me and go, I have no idea what you're even talking about. We haven't done that in the strength room. I haven't done that in rehab. And we go, well, it's really key to biomechanically understand why that's such a powerful move for not only the hip itself, but for things below the hip and things above the hip. Even a quote-unquote sports hernia, we look at and go, wonder what would cause that abnormal stress to the abdominals, and it would be probably something to do with extension, external rotation, and abduction. Oh, there that thing is again. There's that magic move again. So understanding the front butt is a key to applied functional science, and as you journey with us through applied functional science, you're going to find that's going to be a core to understanding the magic behind the magic.
Now, let's look at shoulder overhead mechanics and core strength, things that are very often misunderstood in the areas of training. We were taught to isolate the shoulder, but real overhead movement requires the entire chain. That's why clients experience impingements, core inefficiency, poor mechanics, and lack of strength that correlates to real-world activities and even performance breakdowns. Back to the principles, the strategies, and the techniques yet again. Principle, true overhead function requires the entire chain. Strategy, use 3D drivers to activate thoracic spine, hips, and feet synergy. Technique, 3D shoulder to overhead lift matrix. Now, as it sounds, I can go ahead and do a lift with these little dumbbells, and I usually just go overhead, which is a good start. But there's so much more that the body craves, that the shoulder needs, that the rest of the body says, let me help you, because that's what you do in real life. So we go ahead and take that press and say, let's go ahead and not only press overhead, but lift when we go forward, when we go backwards, when we go same side, when we go opposite side, when we go same side rotational, and when we go opposite side rotational, all going from shoulder to overhead. The shoulder's a lot happier because it says I'm a ball and socket joint, that's what I need to do. But the shoulder's happier because it's not isolated, it's not put on an island. It's integrated with the thoracic spine's ability to move in all three planes, the hip's ability to move in all three planes, the feet and ankle's ability to move in all three planes. That's magic. That's a true chain reaction. We can break this matrix down even further and say, let's not just focus on what the shoulders are doing, but let's emphasize what the core is doing. Now, traditionally, the core is everything but the extremities. That's wrong. The core is everything from the nose to the toes, because everything that moves goes through the core. So we can put emphasis on what we call the anterior core, or we can put emphasis on what we call the posterior core based on the shoulder to overhead lift matrix. If I really wanted to lengthen the back core to turn it on, what I simply do is I take these weights and I go anterior at overhead in the sagittal plane, same side lateral at overhead in the frontal plane, and opposite side rotational at overhead in the transverse plane to lengthen the back core in all three planes. Well, if the back core can get lengthened in all three planes, the front core says, show me how to do that, and we just go in the opposite directions. So to get that anterior core to lengthen in the sagittal plane, I go posterior at overhead. To get it lengthened in the frontal plane, I go opposite side lateral overhead. And to lengthen it in the transverse plane, I go same side rotational at overhead. And that simple lift matrix from shoulder to overhead really focuses on what the shoulder needs to do, but the shoulder needs to do that in conjunction with the core and the entire body. So what essentially you just saw is a metaphorical doorway. Inside core conversion workouts in our treatment and training techniques library, part of the full membership, we explore dozens of overhead strategies that honor true chain reaction biomechanics. Your free functional technique course includes foundational techniques that you can start using today or tomorrow. And your trial membership gives you a hand-selected set of videos that show how these concepts expand. Again, not the full library, but a powerful sample. Gary, come back in here and talk to us about the shoulder, the true core, and what we would call functional strength training.
Hopefully when you saw Doug do the shoulder to overhead, what we call matrix, and the reason it's a matrix is because it's not just straight up, it's taking advantage of both ends of the sagittal plane, both ends of the frontal plane, and both ends of the transverse plane. If you just step back and you actually didn't listen to the magical words, you just saw the magical movement, you'd go, well, that looks like a thoracic spine exercise. No, that looks like a hip exercise. Oh, that looks like a foot exercise. That looks like what he did magically with the foot. That looks like what he just did magically with the hip. That looks like what he's going to magically now, in a little bit, do with the thoracic spine. You're going to say, whoa, whoa, is all magic a chain reaction? And the answer is yes, because all magic is what the body does, and the body is a chain reaction. And so we see an upright function. We talk to ourselves and say, so shoulders and hands and arms, what can you help me with? And says, well, from the thumb to the big toe, and as Doug said, from the nose to the toes, it's the core. So if you can create a stimulus to me, you can magically turn on the right proprioceptors. That may be the greatest magic of all applied functional science, is what those proprioceptors are doing. And I'll guarantee you, we spend a lot of time trying to understand those guys, and it's been a game changer for us, at least in my career over 50 years, to understand the proprioceptors. But understanding what the proprioceptors are doing, when I create this movement and they get turned on, and all of a sudden they turn my abdominals on, and they say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to decelerate that movement that you just did, and we're going to bring you back home, and we're going to allow you to throw better. We're going to allow you to swing better. We're going to allow you to hit better. We're going to allow you to walk better. We're going to allow you to run better. We're going, that's magic. That's really magic, because I can turn on the core in all three planes of motion, but not only from my wrists to my elbows to my shoulders, to turn on that anterior core with loading and exploding, loading and exploding, loading and exploding. But again, the opposite, the back core and the side core and the rotational core. But it's magic because all I'm doing with my patient or client is having them do a press. And magically, the proprioceptors are saying, oh, that's amazing. I can feel that slant. I can feel that gravity load there. I'm going to turn on the right muscles. But here's the beauty. Here's the magic. I'm not only going to turn on the right muscles here in the front part, but the front part of your butt, the front part of your leg. I'm going to go swinging around and even get the back part of your ankle. If you put me in functional positions and you have me do functional magic exercises, again, it's not magic, it's biomechanical, the proprioceptors say, I will magically take care of the rest. I will give you the functional strength you need throughout your entire body. I will give you what we call chain reaction functional strength, because I need that. We've heard this say a lot of times. The weakest link is your weakness. And so if I have a chain reaction, which the body is, and I have a weak link somewhere that I'm not taking care of through my magic mobility and magic stability exercises, well, that's just going to be as strong as I can get. And understanding the concept of matrix, three planes of motion, the proper drivers, using gravity and ground reaction force, using weight, using resistance, using speed, is the magic to turning on more proprioceptors, and turning on more proprioceptors is what functional strength is all about.
Now, our final magic movement focuses on a big rock of the body and one of the most overlooked areas, the thoracic spine. T-spine restrictions disrupt movement above and below, yet they're rarely addressed. This leads to shoulder dysfunction, low back pain, thoracic stiffness, gait inefficiency, and compensation throughout the entire chain reaction of the body. Back, yet again, to the principles, strategies, and techniques one final time. Principle, the thoracic spine must move for the chain to move. Strategy, use lateral and rotational drivers to restore mobility and stability. Technique, type 1 and type 2 matrices. As I demonstrate this, the idea is to couple motions of the thoracic spine. And by coupling motions, we're focusing primarily on the frontal plane, lateral flexion one way or the other way, and rotational or the transverse plane, rotation one way, rotation the other way. How we define type 1 and type 2 motions, or the coupling thereof, is type 2 happens together, where there's lateral flexion one way and rotation in that same way. Type 1 motion occurs when there's lateral flexion one way and rotation in the opposite way. And the thoracic spine needs type 1 and type 2 coupling with all activities that it operates throughout life. So how we do this is we can do it a variety of ways, but in this case, we're just going to go ahead and keep our lower body somewhat stationary and just focus on one hand driving one way, another hand driving another way to facilitate that coupling of motions. Let's start with type 2, again happening together. So type 2 to the right is I'm going to go ahead and take my right hand and do a right rotational at shoulder reach or swing. I'm going to take my left hand and I'm going to go right lateral at overhead, right, type 2. And then I go ahead and combine those together. So I'm getting right rotation and right lateral flexion. I want to do the same thing on the mirrored image or the other side. So I take my left hand and I go left rotational at shoulder reach or swing. I take my right hand and go left lateral at overhead. And then as we combine those together, we're getting rotation to the left and lateral flexion to the left, that type 2 coupling. Well, now in type 1, we still want to get rotation one way, but we need to get lateral flexion the opposite way. So if we started with right rotation, I'm going to ask my left hand to do right rotation at shoulder reach. And then I'm going to take my right hand and do left lateral at overhead reach. And then we go ahead and combine those reaches to get type 1 with rotation to the right. Now we're going to go type 1 with rotation to the left. So the right hand does that work for us. We go left rotational at shoulder. Take the left hand and go right lateral at overhead. And then as we combine that, we're getting type 1 motion with rotation to the left. And our thoracic spine automatically says, my goodness, it's about time someone moves me the way that I'm supposed to move and that I move throughout life. And we need that type 1 and type 2. Now we can even add a layer on there, and instead of coupling, we call it thrupling, because we then add in some flexion or extension in the sagittal plane, because the thoracic spine, that cage, is truly a three-dimensional animal. These matrices are foundational and they're powerful. Inside our treatment and training techniques in our popular functional video digest series, both in the full membership, we explore thoracic mechanics in deep, practical ways. Your free functional techniques course gives you an excellent starting point. And your free trial membership gives you a curated group of videos that help you explore these concepts further. Once again, Gary, come back in and talk to us about the missing piece of the body, the thoracic spine, and its power, especially relationship to type 1 and type 2 coupling.
When you see a great magic trick, you go, wow, that's stunning. Person's laying there and you go, I know they're laying there, and all of a sudden they take a saw and they saw them in half, and it looks like they're still alive, and all of a sudden they get out of this tube and they haven't been cut in half. You go, I have no idea how you did that. But you know there's magic behind it. And talk about magic, talk about the thoracic spine. The thoracic spine is probably the most underrated part of our human body that allows us to have greater functional strength than any other part of our body. And I think the reason why it stayed magic or hidden for so long is that it doesn't whine. In other words, the thoracic spine, the 12 vertebrae, and of course the ribs that are associated with it, and everything that's attached to the thoracolumbar fascia, the multiple attachments that the thoracic spine has through the core and through the ribs, well, if it doesn't whine, we don't think much about it. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. You look at our spine, well, when my low back whines, we're going to try to do something with the low back. When the neck whines, we're going to do something for the neck. But the problem is, in most cases, there's nothing wrong with the lumbar spine, the wheel here. There's nothing wrong with the neck. The axle's bent. In other words, the thoracic spine's not functioning well. And so the car's trying to move along with this whopper-jawed axle, and all of a sudden, the torsion, the abnormal stress is on the two wheels. So we go, well, we better put some grease on those two wheels. And if you've had the same experience I've had, and I've had it over the last 50 years, I realize I'm just treating the symptom. The real problem is the magic of that axle. What in the world does the axle do, and how can I get the axle to do it better? Well, here's the problem. The axle can do so much. It's a three-dimensional creature. Our thoracic spine can flex and extend, laterally flex right and left, rotate right and left, and therefore it will have a natural path of least resistance. That's okay, except when you have to go to the opposite path, all of a sudden the axle's not going to work right. And all of a sudden the axle's not going to take the hit. The low back's going to take the hit. The neck's going to take the hit. Many times the hip takes the hit. Many times the knee takes the hit. We've seen numerous occasions where the foot takes the hit because the thoracic spine hasn't been properly magically mobilized in order to maintain the mobility it needs in all three planes of motion. And therefore, you got to witness what we call type 1 and type 2 motion of the thoracic spine. In other words, the joints go through that motion to give you that triplane movement. The problem with that is because it's a path of least resistance, it's one of those exercises we have to keep after. In fact, as I'm thinking about it, I can't even give you a reason why most of us, even in a preventative stage, let alone in a rehabilitative stage, performance stage, wouldn't be doing all 5 of these magic movements all day long. And you can see they're all components of 3D maps. So get our 3D maps going, get my foot and ankle going in 3 planes of motion, making sure my hips and everything are doing what they need to do and taking advantage of the total body squat ability, turning my core on and giving me that functional strength, having my thoracic spine do what it needs to do and to create that mobility. All of a sudden, my body's going to feel magical. And again, it's not magic. It's creating the mobility to facilitate the proprioceptive reaction, which is the magic that turns on the muscles, that creates the deceleration, that creates the acceleration of movement that we're responsible for. And so when somebody comes to us and say, I want to move better, we need to say, okay, how does movement occur? That's what your journey through AFS is all about. How do I facilitate the environment to get it to occur? That's what AFS is all about. And therefore, literally hundreds and even thousands of videos over the last 50 years compiled to empower you to create the most powerful environments where that person's going to move better, where they're going to enjoy a better life, we're going to have less pain, they're going to perform better, and potentially not even have the problem in the first place. That's what we would call the beauty of magic.
As we close, here's what makes today truly meaningful. Number 1, free access to the Functional Techniques course, a $99 value with CEUs attached. Practical, powerful, ready to use. And number 2, our brand new free Gray Institute trial membership, a curated selection of videos from our membership ecosystem, designed to give you a meaningful first step into applied functional science. We created this trial to complement what you already know and to show you what becomes possible when you understand chain reaction biomechanics, the magic of the body, and deeper principles of AFS. Click the link, activate your free trial, explore functional techniques, and begin applying these magic movements and the principles behind them today, tomorrow, and into the future. We are extremely honored to join you on this journey. So on behalf of Gray Institute, thank you for joining us. Movement, as you know, is a gift, and helping people move better is your calling. This free access gives you a meaningful first step into applied functional science. And if these initial resources resonate, our full membership and certifications take that journey that much deeper. We look forward to journeying alongside you and, as always, encourage you to keep transforming lives through movement.